This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather and Connie Chung.
Good evening. President Clinton stepped out onto the world stage today, delivering his first address to the United Nations as leader of the one and only superpower.
The president outlined what he sees as the role of both the U.S. and the UN, and he made it clear that neither can solve all of the world's problems. Our coverage begins with correspondent Rita Braver at the United Nations.
Security was intense as President Clinton arrived at the United Nations. In the wake of terrorist plots against the World Trade Center and the UN building itself, guards even stood on the podium as Mr. Clinton laid out his vision for the post-Cold War era. The president called for new limits on nuclear arms, including an outright ban on production of fuel for nuclear weapons, and for stronger controls on biological, chemical, and ballistic weapons.
More than a score of nations likely possess such weapons, and their number threatens to grow. These weapons destabilize entire regions. They could turn a local conflict into a global human and environmental catastrophe.
And the president demanded reform in UN operations, including a reduction in the U.S. tab for international peacekeeping. He said with 80,000 UN troops now stationed around the world, the UN must ask how much each future peacekeeping mission will cost and when it will end.
The United Nations simply cannot become engaged in every one of the world's conflicts. If the American people are to say yes to UN peacekeeping, the United Nations must know when to say no.
The president did not directly relate those remarks to the sticky situation in Bosnia, where there's mounting world pressure for some type of intervention, but later he indicated it might be easier to get out of Somalia if there had been more advanced thought on how to restore political stability there. Today's events have underscored the complex international issues facing President Clinton and how difficult it will be to keep foreign policy on the back burner, even though Mr. Clinton would clearly prefer to concentrate on his domestic agenda, especially health care. Rita Braver, CBS News at the United Nations.
While calling for caution on peacekeeping commitments, Mr. Clinton has rejected calls to pull U.S. troops out of Somalia. And his administration is preparing to send a major force into Bosnia if and when a peace treaty is signed. National Security Correspondent David Martin has more from the Pentagon.
More American troops went into Somalia today. This time, 25 engineers to build shelters for U.S. helicopters, which make all too tempting targets for the gunmen opposed to the UN peacekeeping operation. The increase is tiny, but the meaning is clear.
The nature of peacekeeping is changing. We are involved in several strifes, sometimes dealing with men who do not hesitate to use force to achieve the objectives, and so it's becoming rather risky.
If Somalia is the riskiest, Bosnia could be the biggest peacekeeping operation. 50,000 troops, half of them American, if a real peace treaty is signed. A real treaty, but not real peace.
Will not be clean. All fighting will not stop. The conflict has very, very deep roots, and so our troops would be going in harm's way.
Today there are 80,000 troops committed to 17 UN peacekeeping operations worldwide. Some, like those in Israel, have been going on for decades with little notice or danger. But in Bosnia, the UN is trying to keep a peace where there is no peace. The UN is getting in over its head.
There is no military command structure at the United Nations because for the last 45 years of peacekeeping, they really haven't required one.
Until recently, if a peacekeeping commander called in from across the globe when it was night time here in New York, there was no one in the peacekeeping office even to answer the call.
In his speech today at the UN, President Clinton said the U.S. will start asking tough questions before it joins in any more peacekeeping operations. Most importantly, how and when will American troops come home? David Martin, CBS News, the Pentagon.
The former Yugoslavia may be the most pressing concern for President Clinton, NATO, and the UN, but farther east, even more explosive conflicts are underway or looming in the former Soviet Union.
The flashpoints are on Russia's southern rim, in a string of republics that are home to most of the region's 50 million Muslims. In the Central Asian republics of Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, former communists from the Soviet era are trying to hang on to power against local tribal forces. In Armenia and Azerbaijan, the conflict is along religious lines between the Orthodox Christian Armenians and the Muslim Azerbaijanis. But the most violent and dangerous clash is on the shores of the Black Sea, where rebels today claimed a bloody victory over the government of Georgia. The rebels are fighting for independence for the tiny province of Abkhazia. It is part of a fierce political power struggle between Georgian President Edward Shevardnadze and his political rivals. Last week, Shevardnadze personally went to the city of Sukhumi, his government's last stronghold in Abkhazia, to lead resistance to the rebel siege. Today, he had to flee as rebels blasted their way right into the city center. More than 3,000 people have been killed and 100,000 made homeless in the Georgian conflict, which now threatens to spread to Georgia's other ethnic regions.
Of course, the biggest power struggle in the former Soviet Union is for Russia itself, and tonight it is no closer to resolution. Boris Yeltsin today rejected a possible compromise, the idea of simultaneous elections for president and parliament. Correspondent Cindy Kennard has the latest from Moscow.
As Russia's political crisis enters its 7th day, access to the parliament building is now blocked by thousands of riot police. And tonight, Boris Yeltsin went on national television and shattered any hopes for a swift resolution. No joint elections, he told his opponents. Parliament first, then president. No compromise. The angry crowd outside the parliament tonight got angrier, and the other man claiming to be Russia's president, Alexander Rutskoy, called Yeltsin a criminal. But despite the political turmoil, most lives in Moscow have not been disrupted. A CBS News poll conducted after Yeltsin dissolved parliament showed 58% of Muscovites believe the crisis will have little or no effect on their lives. But asked whether truly democratic elections can be held in these conditions, 40% said yes, and 40% said no.
Given this censorship, this monopolization of the media by President Yeltsin, what chance would any of his opponents have? And therefore, what kind of free and fair election would it be?
From behind the walls at the Kremlin, Yeltsin's allies are talking to the other side, but publicly the split grows more bitter.
All sides now agree that early Russian elections are the answer, but neither side is willing to budge tonight on the essential question: who will go first? Cindy Kennard, CBS News, Moscow.
Straight ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News, evidence that much of the nation's water supply can occasionally make you sick.
And later, Eye on America. Tonight, a system that allows thugs to repeat their crimes over and over again.